So welcome back to Vintage Shield Garage. Today we're going to change the cam belt and a water pump on a Fiat 500. Today we're going to do the cam belt and the water pump on the Fiat 500. Now I bought a kit here, there. So we've got a cam belt, as you'd expect. We've got a new water pump. Now it doesn't actually need the water pump, but it's just that the actual cam belt goes around it and it's easy to do while you're there, so we might as well. The car's done 90,000 miles and a new cam belt tensioner. So that whole kit came in at £51 delivered, so that's pretty good value. So the cam belt is accessible from the top here. Taking that cam cover off where it says M5B, and a combination of down through here as well. So I've got to take that plate off, that strap, and there's a plastic plate there where we can see the bottom of the crank. Now I've actually got the front of the car off, as you can see, and that is because I've just recently done another job where I've replaced the exhaust studs that were snapped. I've replaced this coolant hose here, this steel coolant hose, and I've also put a new sump on it. That's why the sump's nice and shiny. So without further ado, let's get it stripped off underneath here so we can see a little bit more access and get this engine mount out. So we've got the strap off that was going top to bottom here, and we've also got the cover off so we can actually see the end of the crank. There's a pulley just up there, I think you can see it up there, maybe you can't. Up here. No, we can't, can you? Hang on. There. There's a pulley up there where we'd get the spanner onto that. Oh, it's not very good lighting, this is it. Do apologise. There you go, let's see what else we can do. Is that any better? So we've got that spanner on where I've lit there. Got a spanner on there, you undo that, then you can take the actual belt off, which is the drive belt for the compressor, air compressor, as in the, sorry, aircon compressor and the alternator, so that's off. Now we're going to take this pulley off, then we're going to take the engine mount off the top here, obviously put something underneath the engine to hold the engine up, take that engine mount off, get this cover off, and then we can get into the cam belt. So I've got the cam cover off now and exposed the cam belt. Probably the hardest part was actually getting this engine mount off here due to the limited clearance to this. You've basically got this with 4 bolts on like that, and you've got the chassis rail here, and you've got to try and get these bolts out. 4 there, 2 there, 2 at the top. The way I did it was to just jack the car up a little bit more to get it a bit higher up and get a 15mm socket on like that. There wasn't enough depth to actually get, basically the shorter you've got it there the better, and then I put a long bar on, had it up here and oofed it out. So that's that out. Then you take the cam covers off, just 2 cam covers, one for the bottom there, one for the top, 3 bolts for the top one, one there, one behind the sticker, and one there. So it's 3 bolts for that, 1 bolt in the middle there. And then we've got the cover off, and you can see the cam belt there. Now actually, interestingly, if we have a look up here, you'll see, even though I said the water pump was fine, the water pump has actually been leaking. If I can just get the light in the right place. You can see there, see on that little core plug, hang on, see the little core plug there, coolant leak on the actual water pump itself, and then this sort of evidence orange rust tail down here, which is then dropped down round into the bottom of here and up there. You see that? You can see there on the new water pump, this is in fact where it was leaking on the engine. So it must be some sort of telltale because that's sealed in there on the back of the water pump. So actually the water pump wasn't far off failing, or had actually failed. And if you look at the Cambelt, if I can get the light in the right angle, you'll see, you can see the cracks in it. So it was starting to go. So all I'm going to do now is get it at top dead centre, mark the pulleys top and bottom, I'll undo that tensioner, take the belt off, get the water pump off, 4 bolts on the water pump, new water pump on, belt back on, tension it, turn it over a few times, rebuild it, job done. The important thing to do now before you take the belt off is to get it lined up at top dead centre and make a reference mark. So what I've done, I've made a little mark here with this little bit of steel, that I know if that's underneath that edge there, that lines up with that. And at the bottom, the pulley's lined up there, so I can now undo the tension, which is 13mm there, undo that and take the belt off. Pump is out now and you can still see the witness mark where it's leaked from here, from this. Let's just put a new one next to it. So you can see it's got like a core plug in there and it had just been leaking from the bottom. Now what I suspect is it's probably because it had a radiator leak, it's probably at some point run dry, and let me just put this in the vise, run dry and got a bit hot, because if you just listen now, you can hear. So there's some play there, so it is shot. Let's get the new pump on. I need to clean the sealants up. Basically there's no gasket for this, so it's just some RTV sealant around the back, 4 bolts in, put it in, and let's get the belt back on. So we've got the tensioner back on, but there's just, I want to pay attention to this here. This is the old one. Basically something you need to line up. You get a tool that goes in there, but what you can do is put a pair of grips on the bottom like this, and you're basically looking for this bit here and this bit to line up. So basically you just put them like that so they're lined up, and then there's a nut on that big hole, and tighten that up, and that's how you tension it. So if we just take a look now, got the top cover, got the belt back on, got the top cover on, got the bottom cover on. All I need to do now is get the engine mount on, which is this here with the 4 bolts, get the pulley on the bottom on there, and then get that engine mount on there. So let's give this a go. Drive belt is back on now for the alternator and the cooling pump, pulley back at the bottom, wheel back on. So let's just recap now. What we actually have done on this engine. Well, this car, we've done quite a lot. We've done gearbox, so we've done a gearbox, clutch, oil seal, new sump, service, exhaust off, new exhaust manifold gasket, new water pump which is there, new cam belt. So quite a lot done. Just got to put some oil in, put the radiator back on, get the coolant in, and then we can run it up and see how it's running. Now then, we have a massive problem. The engine's been running and it's absolutely knocking its nuts off. Didn't do this before, it's only done it now. I've already changed the cam belt and the sump. I've got my suspicion that it's the baffle plate in the sump, because when I looked at it, it was a little bit, and this is the baffle plate here. I think that is catching between the crank. I think it's catching. Fire it up, you'll see what I mean. Ready? not sound good. So, what do you do when this happens? There's only one thing you can do. Strip it down again. Yeah, the sump, there's no witness marks on where the sump's been catching here, so I don't think this is the issue. However, what I have noticed is on the end where it was leaking, which is this end, you just have a look here, you can see a bump there. Now I think it was probably sitting on there and then leaking here. This was the end it was leaking, and there's another bump here as well. So I'm going to try and address those out, just flatten them out so it's not, and then probably put more sealant on. I probably didn't have as much sealant on as I should do as well, but it wasn't too bad. It took me an hour to strip it down to that again. So this time I'm going to put plenty of sealant on the gasket, sealant on the sump. I've probably only used a third of a tube before really, so I'll use a lot more, clean it all up, degrease it, make sure there's no oil, no contamination on it. I don't know why I was doing that. Yeah, a little bit despondent if I'm honest really, but hey ho. What can we do? Carry on. Yeah. Right, let's get the sump back on, cleaned up, and then investigate the noise. Thoughts with the noise, it was clutching at straws really. It was a sump, it didn't sound bottom end, it sounded more top end, sounded like a tappet. Now the only thing is the oil I put in was 530 fully synthetic, and honestly it was like water, and I don't remember the oil coming out like that. So I've got some 1040 oil I think up there. Yeah, I might try that. Maybe it was just tappet noise, because when you rev it, it did go away. Let's give it a go. All back together now. Used a lot more sealant this time on the sump, so I'm going to leave it I think overnight. I'll put a little bit on the vise here just to test, to see when it goes off. I want to make sure it's fully cured before I put oil in. So I've got the battery on charge. Not sure I've cured the problem. I think it might be a noisy lifter, which was that rattle before. I'm not sure if the oil was right, the 530 fully synthetic, but we'll see. CLK is running like a piece of poop, so that's off the road for the moment because that's got crank oil seal leaking. It's also got, I think the crank oil seal is leaking because the oil breathers are blocked, so it's blown in and out the crank seal, and then that's blown oil onto the what do you call it, the crank sensor. So it's having trouble starting, and it's misfiring a lot and not running very well at all. So pressing the Porsche Boxer into use. However, just been for a little test drive in that, and that's got a noisy lifter, but that could be because it's not run for probably 4 months or so. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, how many cars have we got here at the moment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So out of the 5 cars we've got here at the moment, 3 of them are a bit poorly. So I don't think it can get any worse than this, can it really? No, actually, I tell a lie, it is. Out of the 5 cars we've got here, 4 of them are poorly. The GMC's not running right. The GMC's not running right. The Fiat's not running right. The CLK's not running right. The Porsche's got a noisy lifter. That's 4. The only one that's actually working alright is the wife's Mitsubishi Outlander. So things surely can only get better. Put the coolant back in. Put the battery back on. I'm not convinced the knocking will go. I think maybe I've got the Cambelt wrong in some way, or the tension of it wrong. I did read about the tension could be wrong. So what I've actually done, I bought one of these little kits. I put off buying one, and then I bought one, and to be honest it was £20. I should have just bought it to start off with. So what you do, you get, let me just show you inside what you get in the kit. You don't get that torch, by the way, that's just holding the lid down. You get this, which goes on the lower crank wheel, so where we took that wheel off with the 3 bolts on, that goes on there. There's a locating pip there, and then that goes into the cam cover, so that locks the crank wheel in place, and then this locks the cam in place on this little dog here. But what you've got to do, which I'm sort of putting off, is you've got to take the cam cover off, and this goes in the end there, picks up on those, that stud there and that stud there, so I've got to take this off, and that'll go in and lock into the end of the camshaft, so you know you've got the camshaft locked. I'm assuming these 3 bolts. I'm assuming these 3 bolts here go in this, holding onto the crank. You could actually use the original bolts, or they could be for these, I don't know. Anyway, oh, this is probably the most useful part of it. That is to go into that wheel and tension. So if I've got the pulley in here, this is what I was struggling with yesterday. So this goes in here like this, and then spring that round. Obviously that's held still, and you can swing that round and line those up for the tension. So I've got this just in case, because I thought, you know what, Power Amazon, ordered it, £20 delivery free, I may need that. So I might come back to that. So let's see if we can fire it up and see how it runs. Fingers crossed. What you want to get, and it seems silly at first, is one of these stethoscopes. Now there's only a few pound off eBay, and basically it'll pick up the slightest bit of noise, vibration down here, and there's like a diaphragm in here, and you'll hear it in the earpieces. Now this is very good, because although you could just hear a noise in the engine and it just sounded like it's coming from the whole engine, there's this distinct different noise between here and here. Here it was nice and smooth, and as you got further this way it got more metallic, until you got on here and it was really loud. It was basically like someone hitting a knife and fork together, very metallic, ting 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 ting, whereas down here it was more of a sort of a dull mechanical sound. So it was louder at this end and even louder at the water pump on there. Now I suspect down here there's probably, when I take the cover off, there should be some witness mark of where it's been hitting. Maybe a bolt's gone through, I don't know, that's just sat slightly different than before. Maybe there's a bolt slightly longer than before and I haven't realised, and that's catching on it. That could be the issue, I'm not quite sure. But unfortunately we're going to have to part strip this down again, get the wheel off, get the cover off, and take another look at this. So let's get this stripped down. So engine mount off again, cam cover off at the top. Underneath we've got the cam wheel off. You can probably see a little bit better than I had last time. I do need some better lighting, don't I? Let's just try this. There. So you can see I've sealed the sump a lot better this time. Let's try and get, that's probably better lighting, isn't it? You can see I've sealed the sump a lot better this time. No oil leaks there. I've put that cam tool on, so that's locking the crank in place. So there's a little pip there just on the left hand side, then the 3 bolts go in, and then the cam cover bolt goes in, so that locks that in place. First of all I'm going to have a look just at the tensioner, which is up there. I don't know if you can see it. It's cleverly positioned right behind the chassis leg. There, so that's the cam tensioner there. I'm going to check that first of all with that tool and make sure I've got that right, that we haven't put too much load on the actual camshaft itself. So let's see if we can get that undone, and I'll see if I can film that while we're doing it. Well, I'm not too sure. Curiosity got the better of me, so I took the rocker cover off to have a look inside. Two reasons for this. One is, when I stripped all this off, I ran the engine, still couldn't hear any noise down here, and it definitely seemed at this end of the cam cover, as I say, with the stethoscope, it wasn't at that end, it was more at this end. So I thought I'll take it off, there wasn't too many bolts, and having a bit of a coat of good looking at it for a while, I've realised what happens is the oil supply comes up here, up these two. I'm not sure why there's two, I'm not sure if one's up and one's down, but that won't make sense because gravity will just drop back down. So anyway, I think there's two feeds up here. And the reason for that is when I turn the engine over as well, got a bit of squirt of oil out of here. So there's two feeds up here, and then there's a feed down there to the bearing and a feed there. So this is the whole way that the oil gets pumped up the engine, across the rockers, across the camshaft and down. So it's the only way the oil's going to get up. Now when you look at that, so there's two up there, two for there for up, one for down on those bearings. I've checked all the lobes on this and they're fine, there's no damage on any of the lobes. Looks quite good condition really. Make sure all the buckets, they're moving up and down, none of these valves are stuck, so I'm fairly happy with that. All looks fairly clean in there. You've got the oil ways, so there's a hole there, a hole there, a hole there, a hole there for it to drain back down, so that all looks fine. Now this is the interesting bit. On the actual rocker cover itself, so the rocker cover fits on the engine like that. You have this little solenoid in here. Now when I took this solenoid out, that filter there, where the orange bit is, was absolutely full of crap. Now I'm wondering if doing two oil changes, remember, I'll have to look at you for this. Remember this car, we believe, has never ever had an oil change in 90,000 miles, and I've done two oil changes in 0 miles, primarily because I had a bus sump. Well, no, maybe I did half a mile down the road and back. Anyway, so I've done two oil changes in very quick succession. Maybe we've disturbed some crap and it's got blocked in this, and it's got blocked in this, and that has starved the oil filter, starved the oil flow to the rocker cover. So if I flip this over again, you can see these are the two oil wires coming up. There's one there and there's one there to the camshaft, and this, which goes in there, it goes to about that far, and you'll see it basically aligns. I just have to put it there. It aligns with that hole and that hole, that hole and that hole, and then this hole to go down the camshaft. So there's like two in this shuttle valve. I think maybe what it's for is, if this valve is shut for some reason, the oil flows down there, I don't know, and then when it energizes. Now I've also tried it on the ignition, just turn the ignition on and see if this would move, and it hasn't. So I think this needs a coat of looking at as well. Maybe this has failed, maybe it's clogged, I don't know. But I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to get this cleaned out, make sure blow some air around these, make sure these oil ways are clear, get it degreased. I might take it to work actually, put it in the parts washer and degrease it. And I'm thinking that's the problem that we've had, that we've dislodged some crap. I think that sensor there, I think that's a knock sensor for the camshaft, I'm guessing. So I'll take that out as well, take that to work, put it in the parts cleaner and see if we can clean it up. I assume that's some sort of oil seals in there, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's just some basic oil seal there. Maybe there's some crap in these, I don't know. Anyway, Looks like crap in it. Let's have a look at this part number, see what this does. Some sort of solenoid. I think it must be some sort of anti-drain solenoid or something, I'm not quite sure. We'll do a bit of Google on it, find out what it is. But this also coincides, you see. The noise was at this end and this is in here. So I think that's the problem. So the saga continues. Makes sense. I've retensioned the belt. What I'm going to do now is, since I've got the cam cover off, I'm going to put the tool in this end, put the tool down at the bottom end, make sure I've got the cam timing spot on, and then that doubt is gone out of my head. Do a bit of research on that valve and see what we're doing. Despite this car being a complete nightmare and giving me problems, I'm actually really enjoying working on it. I'm enjoying working on it more than the Dodge Dart. I know that sounds crazy, and it's a V8 and it's a muscle car and it's fantastic, and this is just a Fiat 500. But when I was younger I used to have minis. In fact, I think I had 14 minis in my youth. I think I recalled a while ago when one of my daughters asked me. Scary now really, isn't it? Because I digress, but I bought several minis at the time, and this is the real proper minis, the 80s, 70s minis. I bought one for £5, complete car. It was just an MOT failure, £5 the whole car. You probably can't even buy a headlight now for £5. So it's quite shocking really, isn't it? The thousands of pounds even for a scrap one. So I think these are the minis of today, because they are dirt cheap. I've even looked at, worst comes to shove, the engine's a lemon. You can buy a 30,000 mile engine out of a scrap car, and these engines were something like 2007 to 2012. It's the M5B engine, which is on the cover somewhere. Can't find it, but it's on the cam cover. There, that's the engine term, M5B. So they're up to about 2012, so I could actually get one out of a 2012 car, actually between £130 and £300, just for the BR engine. So that's the rocker cover, the cylinder head, the block, and the sump. So worst comes to shove, I'll buy myself a new engine. I'll take the engine out. In fact, they're dead easy to strip out. The whole front end unbolts. You just slide it out on an engine crane. I'll put the gearbox on. I'll put my new cam gear on. So it's not all isn't lost. I'm really enjoying working on it. I'm even thinking now, once my daughter's got this, I might buy myself one myself. I'm really enjoying it. So anyway, let's, I digress terribly there. Let's get back to it. Let's check the cam timing and see where we're up to. Just checking the cam timing now, and I've got that tool back on there. Let me get the light on it. Got that tool back on there, and then this goes up on here, and I think you can just see the keyway there, a slot there, and this actual tool's got a little bit of an angle on it. You can see it's got an angle on it there, and it's actually not going in, so it's as if I'm one tooth off on the cam timing. So that's also very interesting. So what I'm going to do is undo the tensioner, take the belt off, move this so I can line that up, and then retension the belt. I may be one tooth out. I'm going to mark it on here and then see if I end up one tooth out. Tool's in the end there now, and you'll see I made a mark there, and it's actually moved probably one tooth. And if I just rock this, you'll see that's the oil coming up there. So that's how the oil gets up, as I was saying, and get a bit of a momentum on it, get a bit of oil up, so that's where it's coming up there, and then running along that bar, which I think is the block bit. So tooth out. Interesting. Could that be the cause of the problem as well? The rattle? Don't know. Usually Cambelt out one tooth is just poor power. Anyway, I'll tell you what it does tell you. For £20, buy the right tool. It was way easier tensioning it. I don't know why I didn't bother looking at the price of the tool, to be honest. I may never do one of these again. Oh no, I might do if I buy one for myself, mightn't I? Anyway, quite pleased with that. Let's get the cam belt back on, timed up, and we know that end's properly done. We just need to clean that valve out, work out what that valve does, whether we should see it operate at any point, and take it from there. I've done a bit of research on this solenoid, and of course what we mean when we say we've done research, what we really mean is we've looked on Google. And it's not an anti-drain valve or some sort of restrictor as I first thought. It's a variable valve solenoid, and what this actually does is it controls oil to go into the cam wheel. If I try and explain the cam wheel on the end of the cam, it advances and retards that a little bit. So it's got an inner which is connected to the cam and the outer, and that's fluid filled, and this valve has a shuttle in it where it'll let oil into one side or the other, and it will vary that by a couple of degrees. And it's not for power in the case of this car, it's more for emissions. So what I've noticed is when you look at this, it's got a filter in the middle here and two outlets. The outside of this filter was fully clogged with dirt, so I suspect that this valve wasn't shuttling. I'm going to put a voltage on it, 12 volts on it, and see if I can get it to move, because it's only going to be one state or the other. It's not like a varied position, it's just going to engage or disengage. So I'm going to try that, get the rocker cover back on, and see if we can fire it up and see if it sounds a lot better than what it was the other day. Well guys and girls, I think we got there. No oil leaks. So if you remember, we ran it up, we changed the sump, the water pump, the cam belt, we got a sump leak, and we got a horrendous knocking noise at the top. Well, sump leak has cured itself. I just put double the amount of sealant on I should have done in the first place, and the knocking noise is gone, which was up at this end. Even though I stripped and checked the cam timing, I did find it 1 tooth out when I bought that tool, so do buy that tool. I believe what the problem was is that there, which is the variable valve timing solenoid for the cam on the end. I think it was starving it of oil and making that horrendous noise, so I cleaned that out and it's now okay. Probably been running it for 10 minutes. Coolant keeps going up and down while it's filling itself up, which is good, while I'm bleeding that. So I think things are looking good. I think we got to the end of it. Fingers crossed. Front bumper on, wash and a polish, and we're done. Let's hope so. Please like and subscribe. Please keep watching. More things to do, more car projects this year. Yeah.